Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today we're going to be continuing the top 50 board games of all time list with numbers 40 to 31, the 2022 edition. If you have any questions about any of the games I talk about here, please leave questions down in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the support. Let's get started talking about some incredible solo board games. My number 40 goes to Caverna, where you play as a race of fantasy creatures, developing your farm outside of your giant cave dwelling. You'll also be doing some mining, collecting some animals, and building a litany of rooms in the form of furnishings. Now, furnishings are my favorite part about this game. You'll have all these tiles that you can pick from, row after row after row, with all different abilities, ways to increase the amount of workers that you have to send out on the board, as well as different endgame scoring conditions. But I really enjoy that based on the fantasy race that you pick, you're going to have all of these different rooms populating the board. And you can pick a couple of them and try to make a strategy around those tiles and see how it plays out. And I really just enjoy the options. One of these rooms is the guest room, and it has this awesome ability where either an or becomes and for you. And that's such an awesome effect because now all of these spaces open up a lot of interesting potential, and it's going to lead you down some strategies that you may not have chosen before. Super cool, and I love the way this is implemented. The other thing I really enjoy in Caverna is the fact you can upgrade your workers through the use of weapons and adventuring. One of the spaces on the board is going to allow you to craft weapons, and you can go on adventures with these weapons. Based on how high the level is, that determines the amount of goods and rewards that you get for going on adventures, and then you level up at the end of this. I love that you're allowed to improve the people that you're sending out, and you can focus on having a really large amount of characters and sending them out for a variety of tasks, or really increasing the potential and abilities of a few key characters. I really like the way that this is done and how you can increase the potential rewards by really focusing in on those specific characters. So that is my number 40, Caverna the Cave Farmers. My number 39 is a bit of a cheat. This is a combination of Sprawlopolis and its sequel, Agropolis. And the reason they're combined here is because there's actually expansion where you can combine them called Combopolis. Now, if I were to recommend one over the other, I would recommend Agropolis because of its scoring conditions. I think they're a little bit more interesting. And that's one of the things I really like about this game is its variable scoring. The gameplay is really straightforward. You're going to take this deck of cards, shuffle them up, and then take 3 of those cards and put them face up, and they have your scoring criteria on the back. Such a great, clean concept, and it makes for a lot of variable and interesting games, and I love this about it. You'll be placing cards on top of each other, next to each other, trying to satisfy these conditions while also making sure that you're having matching colors and areas, but trying to satisfy those scoring conditions. And I love the variable setup and scoring here. The different scoring cards make great use of the different features present on all of the different types of cards, and that makes for some really interesting combinations, and depending on the layout of the cards and the different expansion content you're using, can lead to a lot of memorable experiences as you try to chase down maximum points. And in the solo experience, you can take all the time you need to do this. So for a quick pocket-sized puzzle game with amazing variable scoring, that's my number 39, Agropolis and Sprawlopolis. My number 38 goes to Race for the Galaxy, an engine-building game that features multi-use cards and a wonderful phase system, where when you play an action card to trigger a phase, everyone's going to participate in it, but you get a bonus for choosing it yourself. The solo mode for this game is ran through one of the expansions, the Gathering Storm, and it comes with this large player mat that is going to change based on the starting world that your AI opponent chooses. You'll put different tiles onto the board, and that's going to change the frequency at which it does specific actions, as well as change the actions it actually performs. I really like this system, and I think it's really intuitive in the way that it makes the game feel like a different player each time. That's my favorite part about this system, is no matter what you decide to play against, it's going to have a different way that it performs and plays and feel like a different opponent. I really enjoy the ease of running the AI and how simple it is to build the different cards that are available to it. It's a great solo system for a wonderful engine building game. That is my number 38, Race for the Galaxy. My number 37 goes to Paladins of the West Kingdom, a worker placement game where you'll be taking your own workers and putting them on your own personal player board. You also have the central board where it has its own spots, as well as different commodities and resources that you'll be competing for. Now, this is my favorite solo game out of the West Kingdom trilogy, and that has to do with its scaling and challenging AI system. The solo mode of the game is going to utilize the backside of the player boards, and I really enjoy it because it telegraphs what the solo mode options currently are, what different cards it's going to be taking from the different rows, so it gives you a way that you can plan and see what could be coming up potentially. But this can change in an instant because the actions that the solo mode takes are randomized, and I love this because you're not exactly sure what's going to come up with specific actions, but you have a potential idea of what could actually happen. I think it's a really elegant system, and it works extremely well, and it scales throughout the game by adding new additional cards to the deck that will take up some of those spots that are in the center of the board. The more options that come to you, the more that go to the AI. Super well done, and it gives you a lot of time to be thoughtful and careful with the different actions you're taking and weighing your different options throughout the system. For a thoughtful solo worker placement experience, my number 37 is Paladins of the West Kingdom, best of that West Kingdom trilogy for solo play. My number 36 goes to the dungeon crawler storytelling narrative game Middara, Unintentional Malum Act 1. This has you playing a JRPG in a board game format, where you have these characters that'll be gathering a bunch of items, experience, traits, and going out into scenario after scenario, all tied together with a wonderful narrative story. Now, one of my favorite parts about this game is the character customization. I love that at the very beginning of the game, after your trial missions, you can deck out your character as you see fit. You've experienced a lot of the different options, the different melee and ranged weapon attacks and spells, and you can choose the path that you want to take. I really love all of the options present, and your characters feel like someone that you have journeyed with and you've created over time. I also really love the different traits and different abilities that you can pick up through using experience, because these make your character feel extremely powerful, as you have lots of different actions that you can exhaust. And I love having access to a bunch of different powers and abilities in these campaign dungeon crawl games, and you get familiar with how to use them the more you play. The other thing I really love about this game is the narrative and the story itself. There's a free foreteller app for this game where you can actually get an audio version of it and have someone read it to you, and this is wonderful. It makes the game approachable and accessible because you can just hit the play button, listen to the story, and get engaged as you set up for the next mission, or if it's just during your downtime, you may want to hear what happens next. I love Middara's story, its action, its customization, its dice system. There's a lot to love with this campaign game. That is Middara Unintentional Malum Act 1, my number 36. My number 35 goes to Atlantis Rising 2nd Edition, where you play as the citizens of Atlantis, doing your best to collect resources and create these components in order to help your entire city evacuate safely. Now, the solo mode is really interesting because it adds new components to the game in the form of an automaton piece and a hologram piece. The automaton is going to boost your numbers when you use it when taking specific actions, as you're going to be rolling to resolve to try to gather resources, but then you're also going to have access to a hologram character, which is going to gain the ability of one of the characters that you are not playing. And it cycles every turn. You're going to be able to pick from 2 different character effects, and I love this mechanism. It allows you to get the feel and the abilities of all of the different characters that are available in the game, but in that one single session. This is so exciting because you're not sure when things are going to come up, and you can plan for seeing specific abilities in the future the more that you get familiar with this game. The next thing I really enjoy about this game are the components themselves. These are your goals, what you're trying to build. You're going to be collecting gold and crystal and atlantium in order to build them, but once you do, they become spaces that you can use, or they'll have a one-time effect that you can use immediately. I also love that the components scale with the difficulty of the game. The harder the difficulty, the more resources the components will take to create, but the more interesting and cool effects that they have. This is such a great system, and I love that the win conditions also progress with the power of the players. Atlantis Rising presents push your luck, risk management, and powers and abilities galore in a beautiful package. So that is my number 35, Atlantis Rising 2nd Edition. My number 34 goes to Friday, a deck building game where you play as Friday, training Robinson Crusoe in order to help him escape the island alive by taking down pirates. One of my favorite parts about this game is how you manage failure. Whenever you're taking on a task, you have a certain number that you're trying to reach. If you reach that threshold, excellent, you get to add that card into your deck. But when you fail that challenge, then instead, based on how much you failed by, you're allowed to remove that many cards from your deck. This is so interesting because there are some challenges that you may optionally choose to lose in order to ensure you're able to get rid of some really bad cards in your deck. I love this choice, and I love that it's tied to your life force, increasing your potential and your performance throughout the game. And on the flip side, my other favorite part about this game are the different cards that you're adding to the deck and the potential combos that can come through the various effects. You have a lot of standard tropes when it comes to card games, drawing things, exchanging things, planning, but the way that the game comes together and allows you to chain and combo is extremely satisfying. Friday offers a lot of different difficulty levels and allows you to approach the game as you see fit at the difficulty level that you're most comfortable with. For a combo-tastic yet thoughtful solo deck building experience, I recommend Friday, my number 34. My number 33 goes to Heroes of Tenefyr, a deck building game that's set up as a dungeon crawler, where you take on the role of a fantasy character and you'll be going through dungeons, defeating monsters, and every time you do, they get added to your deck as upgraded cards. One of my favorite parts about the game is how the decks are constructed. At the start, you're going to be picking fantasy races and combining their different abilities into a single deck. I love this because as you progress during the game, you're going to be gaining new abilities that are class specific, and this is going to bring up a lot of variety and a lot of interesting combos and choices with the way that you've paired your different characters from that initial decision. The best part about this game, though, are the player turns. When you go, you're going to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck and decide if you want to keep and use those cards, or you can discard them and draw 3 new ones. You can do this as often as you like, but once you run out of cards in your deck, you are done participating in that dungeon. And as a solo player, you're going to get to use your deck twice, or if you're playing two-handed, each of those players will get to take 1 turn. I really like this choice because the amount of time that you spend in the dungeon is also the amount of cards that you're going to potentially add to your deck, because whenever you defeat a monster, it goes into the player that defeated its discard pile to be used later and increase their stamina. This is such a clever system because every decision you make matters, and if you decide to keep a subpar hand, this means that you can potentially fight longer in these dungeons, getting more rewards. And if you make it all the way to the end of a dungeon, you get one of these special reward cards, which gives you an additional effect on top of everything else. A clever deck building system with great push your luck in the form of cards and amazing comboing and upgrading. This is Heroes of Tenefyr, my number 33. My number 32 goes to Nusfjord, where you play as fishermen in northern Norway, doing your best to collect a variety of victory points in the form of stocks, money, fishing boats, as well as a variety of buildings with lots of different varied effects. The core mechanism of the game is worker placement, and you'll be placing your discs onto an action board, but the solo mode of the game has you playing with multiple colors of discs. If you're playing the basic, you have 2 colors, but if you're playing the advanced, you'll have 3 different colors, and every round you use a specific color, so you end up blocking yourself from specific actions. This is really interesting because you have to really plan and time out when you're going to be taking specific things and when you want to utilize the copy action, which allows you to use an already used space. There's a bunch of great decisions going on here, and I love the way that it plays out, and you can also play a campaign that's going to tie 3 different games together and interchanges some of the buildings during that gameplay. And speaking of buildings, that's my other favorite part of this game. When you start, you're going to choose a set of buildings. They have a specific fish type on the back of them, and then you'll shuffle them up and randomly place them into an available market. Based on the ones you choose, it's going to drastically change your plan for your game experience. You have a limited amount of turns, so you have to decide which different paths you're going to go towards. And if you play that campaign, you're going to be seeing different buildings every time. I love the way this system works, as it's going to encourage you to make interesting choices and go for different combos and see how they play out throughout your play of the game. Nusfjord's self-blocking mechanism and variety of different buildings make it shine for a solo game. That's my number 32, Nusfjord. My number 31 goes to the Imperium system of games. This is currently Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends. These are deck-building games where you're going to be taking the role of a civilization, developing your civilization throughout, culling a variety of cards, and doing your best to get through your deck as much as possible in order to develop your nation and watch it progress. The solo mode of Imperium Classics and Legends is extremely easy to implement, as you'll shuffle up a deck as if it was playing against you and then lay out cards on these number tokens underneath the market. You'll roll the die, and based on the number, that's the card that it'll skip for that turn. And then you'll reveal the cards one at a time, referencing one of these AI charts here based on the faction that you're actually going to be playing against. Each of the faction plays differently, so they're going to feel like you're facing an opponent with its own brain and its own sense of an approach. It's going to be targeting specific cards in this available market, and based on the different abilities that it has, it may interact negatively with you as well, which adds for an added challenge. I love how easy the system is, as you simply flip a card over, resolve it, and then move on. Just like you, it's trying to progress through its deck, and it's going to be racing you to gain as many victory points as possible. The solo game of Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends shines because you get to do a lot on your turn. In the multiplayer game, this led to a lot of downtime, but in this solo setting, you're really able to take the time you'd like to eke out as many small actions and big actions as you can. I really love the faction progression in this game. Every time that you get through your deck, you're going to be upgrading your card with these moon cards. Once they all run out, you'll start to be able to pay for these new development cards once your nation becomes civilized. This is going to give you some cool choice in your upgrade paths and what you want to do with your faction. On top of that, there's going to be a market in the center that'll have a variety of cards that you can take and add to your deck. You even have options where if there's a card you really need and you can't really take it, you can skip your whole turn just to grab that card. I love that that option is always present, and it allows for some really interesting and cool plays and lets you get specific cards that you may be hunting for. The Miko's art in this game is also top-notch, as almost every single card is full art and features some unique take on a historical civilization. And the last thing that I want to mention that makes this an exceptional solo game are all of the small, unique powers and abilities that you'll be accumulating throughout your gameplay. At the start of the game, you'll have some cards that have these infinity icons, and you'll be able to add more to your deck as you play. Every time you play one of those infinity cards, not only are you decreasing your deck size, which means that you're going to be able to get through your deck faster and advance your civilization, but now you have access to an effect that you'll be benefiting on for the whole entire game. This game is not a short one. You're going to be taking a lot of turns, so if you get a card out, it feels so good when you consistently use those powers and abilities. There are actions that you'll be taking every turn to play these different cards, and then you have the ability for exhaust actions, which are kind of like free actions that you can take, but those are also limited. I love the different choices here, and I love all of the powers and abilities that you'll be building into your civilization. If you're looking for more straightforward factions, go with Imperium Classics, but if you're looking for some really out there factions with really interesting win conditions and gameplay patterns, check out Imperium Legends. But you cannot go wrong with either. These are incredible solo games. That's my number 31, Imperium Classics and Imperium Legends. And that's the list. Those are my number 40 through 31 of my top 50 solo board games of all time. What do you think about the games that I talked about here? Have you played any of them? Were you surprised to see some of them on the list, or surprised to see them too soon on the list? I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.